Hi guys, welcome to the Places in News by Sudeep Vers, and I know that this is the most awaited video across the country, and I'm happy to announce that we have done it in detail. And make sure that you keep an atlas with you and mark all the places as and when we go. And I hope that you will enjoy it. We have tried to cover it as comprehensively as possible to help you for your upcoming UPSC Prelims exam. One unique aspect of this video is we are not only covering the places that are in news, but we are also covering the static part within the region where the places are in news, because that is how UPSC is also asking the question in the last 2 years. So I hope that you will make a good use of this. One small request is it takes tremendous effort to do this, so please make sure that you share this video with as many people as possible, like this video and comment on this video. It means a lot to us. I hope you'll enjoy it. Pick up the atlas, keep a marker with you and start marking the places, because these places are very important for your upcoming prelims exam. Enjoy. First, we are going to look at the static part of West Asia, and then we are going to move into the places in news of West Asia. Why we are doing this is because mainly in UPSC exams, not only will they ask the places in news, but they'll also ask the static part that are there surrounding the places in news. That is why whenever we see the places in news, we also have to focus on the static part, and that's why we're going to follow this pattern in this video. First, we are going to look into the important deserts of West Asia. The first is Rabal Khali. Understand that it is also known as empty quarter. It is the largest continuous sand desert that spreads across Saudi Arabia, Oman, Yemen and UAE. The next is the important deserts of Iran, that is Dashti Kavir and Dashti Lut. Dashti Kavir is in north central Iran and Dashti Lut is in the southeastern part of Iran. Now let us look into the important mountains of West Asia. The first is Zagros Mountain. These mountains are located in western Iran and they extend to northern Iraq and southeastern part of Turkey. And understand that Zagros mountain is an important origin of the Karun river, that is the only significant river of Iran. The next is Taurus Mountains. It is located in southern Turkey and is an important source of Tigris river. And the next is Pontic Mountains. These are present along the coast of Black Sea. They are present along northern Turkey and they separate the Anatolian plateau of Turkey with the Black Sea. The next mountains are Elbrus Mountains. These Elbrus Mountains are present in northern part of Iran and southern part of Caspian Sea, and the highest peak is Damavand, which is the highest peak of Iran. The next very important mountains are the Caucasus Mountains. Understand that these Caucasus Mountains are geopolitically always in news. The important Caucasus countries are Armenia, Azerbaijan and Georgia. Now these Caucasus countries or the Caucasus Mountains comes at the junction of the Caspian Sea and the Black Sea and acts as a bridge between the West Asia and Eastern Europe. And the last important mountains are Mount Ararat. These are present in eastern Turkey near the Armenian border. Let us now look into some major rivers of West Asia. The first is Tigris River. Understand that Tigris River takes birth in Taurus Mountains. Taurus Mountains is in Turkey, but Tigris River, though it takes birth in Turkey, it majorly flows in Iraq. The next important river system is Euphrates. Euphrates takes birth in eastern Turkey and it mainly flows through Syria and Iraq. Did you know that Tigris and Euphrates will confluence in the southern part of Iraq to form Shatt al-Arab, and this Shatt al-Arab will empty out into the Persian Gulf. The next important river is Jordan River. Jordan River flows through Israel, the west bank part of Palestine and Jordan, and then empties out into the Dead Sea. The next important river is Karun River. Karun River is the only navigable river and the largest river of Iran. It rises in Zagros Mountains and drains into Shatt al-Arab. Now let us briefly look at the important seas and water bodies. The first is the Mediterranean Sea. Now look at the Mediterranean Sea carefully and see that the European countries, the North African countries and the West Asian countries together will border the Mediterranean Sea. And since we are discussing the West Asian countries, the West Asian countries that border the Mediterranean Sea are one, Turkey, the next is Syria, the next is Lebanon, the next is Israel, and the last is the Gaza part of Palestine. The next important water body is the Red Sea. Now understand that the Red Sea is mainly located between the northeastern part of Africa and the northern part of Arabian Peninsula, and 6 main countries border the Red Sea. The 6 main countries are, you have the Egypt, Sudan, Djibouti and Eritrea on the African side, and you have Yemen and Saudi Arabia on the West Asian side. But what you should also understand is there is a small opening within the Red Sea, and that is called as Gulf of Aqaba. Gulf of Aqaba is bordered by 4 countries. So these countries include Egypt, Israel, Jordan and Saudi Arabia. Now let us look at the Persian Gulf, which has always been in news, and within the Persian Gulf there is something called Strait of Hormuz, which everyone would have studied. But now understand that the Strait of Hormuz is between Iran and the exclave of Oman, that is called as Musandam Peninsula. So the Strait of Hormuz is a gateway between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. And now if you observe the Persian Gulf carefully, the countries that are bordering the Persian Gulf are as follows. Look at the map carefully. You have first identify Kuwait, and from Kuwait let us go in the clockwise direction. You have Kuwait, you have Iraq, you have Iran, you have Oman, you have UAE, Qatar, Bahrain and Saudi Arabia. Adjacent to the Persian Gulf, you have Gulf of Oman. Gulf of Oman basically connects the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea, and Gulf of Oman is basically bordered by, one is Oman, Iran and UAE. Another place that has always been in news is the Strait of Bab el Mandeb. Now, why was it in news? Is because of the Houthis who were trying to destroy any ships crossing the Strait of Bab el Mandeb. Now, observe the Gulf of Aden carefully. Now, if you observe the Gulf of Aden mainly connects the Red Sea with the Arabian Sea, and that Red Sea and Arabian Sea are connected through a strait, and that strait is what is known as the Strait of Bab el Mandeb. So, if you take the Gulf of Aden and what are the countries that are surrounding Gulf of Aden, look at it carefully. The countries that border the Gulf of Aden are, in the African continent, you have the Djibouti and Somalian country. And then in West Asia, you have Yemen. So overall, three countries that border the Gulf of Aden. One is Djibouti and Somalia in the African continent. And in the West Asian part, you have Yemen. So Djibouti, Somalia and Yemen are the countries that border the Gulf of Aden. So just to summarize the important straits of West Asia, the first is the Strait of Hormuz that connects the Persian Gulf with the Arabian Sea. The next is the Strait of Bab el Mandeb that connects the Red Sea with the Gulf of Aden. And the third is the Strait of Tiran that connects the Sinai Peninsula with the Saudi Arabia. Now coming to some important places in news in West Asia. The first, let us look at Syria. Within Syria, you have a city called Suweda city. Suweda city is a Druze majority area that is noted for anti-government protests and economic hardships. The next important place in Syria is Tartus. Tartus hosts Russia's naval facility and is key for Moscow's Mediterranean presence. The next important place in Syria is the Golan Heights. This place was captured from Syria in 1967 by Israel and is a place of conflict for Israel, Syria as well as Hezbollah activities. The next important place in Syria is Idlib. Idlib was in news because the Syrian security forces arrested 16 Uzbek fighters. This resulted in protests from the Uzbek foreign militants against the Syrian security forces. The next important place is Aleppo. Now, Aleppo was always shown as a symbolic city of war reconstruction, but this city has also fallen into renewed clashes. The next important place is Deir ez-Zor. Now, Deir ez-Zor is present in the eastern part of Syria and it is very rich in oil reserves, and it has fallen into clashes between the Syrian security forces, the ISIS remnants and as well as the foreign militias. So these are some important places in news in Syria. Now let us move into the Lebanon. In Lebanon, the first place that you have to look at is Tyre. It is a coastal city in southern Lebanon and it has been in news because of the tensions between Israel and Hezbollah. The next important place is a river in Lebanon and that is known as Litani River. Now Litani River is present in the southern Lebanon part and this river lies entirely within Lebanon. But it is very close to the Lebanon-Israel border, and one of the demands of Israel was for the Hezbollah group to move north of this river, and hence Litani River has always been in news. Now let us move into the hotspot of West Asia, and that is Iran. And the first place that I want you to look at is Isfahan. Understand that Isfahan hosts major nuclear complexes and has always been an international concern for nuclear facilities. The next important place is Fordo. Fordo is known for deeply buried, heavily fortified uranium enrichment sites. And the next place is Natanz. It is a major uranium enrichment center. And the next place is Arak. Arak is known for heavy water reactor complexes which are central to plutonium production. The next place is Tabriz. Tabriz is very strategically located near Turkey, Armenia and Azerbaijan and plays a vital role in military logistics. The next place is Kermanshah. Kermanshah is near the Iraq border and it is where most of the Western military movements happen, and it is also dominated by Kurdish militants. You also have Khuzestan province in Iran that is bordering Iraq, that is also very famous for its oil reserves. Apart from this, you have Qom, which is a major Shia city near Fordo. The next is Shiraz, which is an important industrial complex of Iran. The next is Yazd, known for Iran's renewable energy capacity. Bandar Abbas, which is an important port of Iran near the Strait of Hormuz. And finally, you have Bushehr, that is Iran's only nuclear power plant that has been built by Russia and is the only power plant that is operational. So we are done with the places in news in Iran. Now let us move into the next battleground, and that is Yemen. So in Yemen, you have some important places in news, and the first is the Strait of Bab el Mandeb. Obviously, why it is in news is because it is a critical choke point which is targeted by the Houthi forces in order to disrupt the global trade. The next is Udaydah port, and this port is Yemen's Red Sea port, which is vital for humanitarian assistance. The next is Sana'a, which is the capital city that is controlled by the Houthi rebels. And the next is Marib, which is very rich in oil and gas reserves, and hence there is a conflict in order to capture Marib for economic significance. So now we are done with the places in news in Yemen. Let us move into Iraq. In Iraq, one of the important places in news is Erbil. Erbil is the capital of the Kurdistan region of Iraq, and it is the political center of the Kurdish people. Then you have Sinjar and Kirkuk. These are two places that are always in news because there is a conflict between the Kurdish forces and the Baghdad authorities. Next, let us go into another important hotspot, and that is Gaza. Now understand that if you take Palestine, Palestine has two enclaves. The first enclave is the West Bank and the second enclave is Gaza. Now the Gaza Strip shares its border with the Mediterranean Sea. So observe carefully which are the places in news. The first place is Netzarim Corridor. Now understand that Netzarim Corridor is a corridor created by Israel at the central part of Gaza, dividing northern Gaza and southern Gaza to help them in their military movements. The next is the Rafah crossing. Rafah crossing is the crossing between Gaza and Egypt. It is the main crossing that is used for humanitarian assistance and for evacuation of civilians. The next is the Erez crossing. Understand that Erez crossing is the border between Israel and northern Gaza, and it is mainly a crossing where Palestinian workers come into Israel, but it is infamously known for the October 2023 attack from Hamas who came through this Erez crossing. The next is the Philadelphia corridor. It is a narrow strip between Egypt and Gaza, and Israel argues that Hamas used underground tunnels beneath this corridor in order to smuggle weapons into Israel. The next is Khan Yunis. It is the second largest city in Gaza and is considered as an Hamas stronghold. Now we have seen some important places in news in the Gaza Strip. Now let us look at the places in news in Israel. In Israel, one of the places that is in news is Haifa. It is a major coastal city of Israel and an industrial hub, and it is usually threatened by Hezbollah rockets during regional tensions. The next city is Netanya. Netanya is also a coastal city in Israel, and it is also in news because of the security threats from Hezbollah as well as Iran in the form of missile attacks or drone attacks. The next is Nevatim Air Base. It is said to house the most advanced aircrafts of F-35s, and it was in news because of the attack that was targeted by Iran on the Nevatim Air Base. The next important place was Dimona. Dimona was in news because of the attacks from Iran, and Dimona is known for Israel's undeclared nuclear programs, and it is a site of Negev Nuclear Research Center. Now, after looking at the places in news in Israel, let us also look at the Palestinian part of West Bank. We just saw the Palestinian part of Gaza Strip. Now the Palestinian part of West Bank, there are some places that are important that you should know, and the first one is Ramallah. It is an administrative center of Palestine and an important political and governance center. The second is Hebron city. Hebron city usually will have Israel-Palestine conflicts and tensions, and hence it is always in news. And the next important city is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city that is contested from Judaism, Islam as well as Christianity for its control. So these were some important places of the West Bank part of the Palestine. And now let us move into the Egypt. In Egypt, two main places are in news. One is Sharm el-Sheikh. The Sharm el-Sheikh is an important hub for tourism and international summits. The second is Sumed pipeline. The Sumed pipeline is also in news because it's a pipeline that connects the Suez Canal with the Mediterranean Sea, or Sumed pipeline also connects the Red Sea with the Mediterranean Sea. So hence, this pipeline has also become very critical in today's geopolitical tensions. Now, apart from this, these are some terms that you keep hearing, especially in the geopolitics of West Asia. The first is Blue Line. It is a UN demarcated withdrawal line between Lebanon and Israel. The second is Green Line. Green Line is the de facto boundary between Israel and the Palestine territories of Gaza and West Bank before the 1967 war. The third is Yellow Line. Yellow Line is a recently declared line by the Israeli security forces in southern Lebanon. And the last is Morag Axis or Morag Corridor. It is a corridor created by the Israeli security forces in southern Gaza. It mainly lies between Khan Yunis and Rafah. Alright guys, so this is West Asia. So in West Asia, not only have we seen the places in news, we have also seen some of the static part of West Asia that can come in the upcoming UPSC Prelims exam. So I hope it was helpful. Let us move on to the next one. Now let us move into the Eastern Europe. Again, Eastern Europe is very important from your exam point of view because there has been a lot of places that are in news. Now observe the places exactly in the order that I tell you. Please open up Eastern Europe in your atlas and identify the Sea of Azov. Okay, so once you have identified the Sea of Azov, you can pause and identify it. I am just going to go with the flow. So once you identify the Sea of Azov, from Sea of Azov, you move into the Black Sea. Now from Sea of Azov to move into the Black Sea, you have something called Kerch Strait. Now very important because the Kerch Bridge was destroyed recently. That we will come back later, but identify the static part. So from Sea of Azov to go to the Black Sea, you have to pass through the Strait of Kerch. After that, from Black Sea, if you have to go to the Sea of Marmara, you have to cross through the Bosphorus Strait. So from Black Sea to Sea of Marmara, you have to cross through the Bosphorus Strait. So now from Sea of Marmara, if you have to go to the Aegean Sea, you have to pass through Dardanelles Strait. Okay, and from Aegean Sea, you go to the Mediterranean Sea. So again, I'll repeat it. Sea of Azov. From there, you have the Kerch Strait, and then you go to the Black Sea. From Black Sea, you have the Bosphorus Strait, and you go to the Sea of Marmara. And Sea of Marmara, you have the Dardanelles Strait, and from Sea of Marmara, you have the Dardanelles Strait. From there, you go to the Aegean Sea, and from Aegean Sea, you go to the Mediterranean Sea. Now, after looking at them, now understand the important ports along the Black Sea. So if you observe the Black Sea, some important ports are first Odessa. Now, Odessa is a major Ukrainian port that is targeted through missile strikes from Russia. The second important port is Constanta. Constanta comes in Romania, and it is the largest port of European Union and serves as an alternative route of grain transport in Eastern Europe. And the third important port is Varna. This comes in Bulgaria and is an important trade port as well as a naval port. Another important port in Bulgaria is Burgas. This is also very important for energy terminals as well as refining activities. One more important port in Black Sea is Novorossiysk. Understand that Novorossiysk belongs to Russia and it is an important port of Russia in Black Sea. So overall, if you observe the Black Sea is mainly surrounded by 6 countries. On one side, you have Romania, Bulgaria and Ukraine. On the other side, you have Russia, Turkey and Georgia. Another important sea is the Adriatic Sea. Adriatic Sea is mainly located between the Greece Peninsula and the Balkans. And the Adriatic Sea is mainly bordered by 5 important countries. You have the Albania, you have Montenegro, you have Bosnia-Herzegovina, you have Croatia and Slovenia. Now, after looking at the static part of the Eastern Europe, now let us look at the places in news in Eastern Europe. The first important place is Suwalki Gap. Now, the Suwalki Gap or Suwalki Corridor is a narrow strip of corridor that separates Poland from Lithuania. But this narrow strip of corridor is also the corridor that connects the Kaliningrad, which is the exclave of Russia in the Baltic Sea, with the Belarus. Now, this is a very vital strategic corridor because if Russia decides to capture this corridor, then Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, these are the Baltic countries, Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia will be cut off from the NATO aid if Russia captures this Suwalki Gap or Suwalki Corridor. Now, apart from this, you have the Russia-Ukraine war and hence many places of Ukraine are in news. Let us look at few places from there. The first place is Luhansk. Luhansk is central to the Donbas conflict and it is in the eastern part of Ukraine that is currently captured by Russia. The next place is Kherson. Kherson is a city near Dnipro river and it is in news because the Ukrainian forces retook the Kherson city, but it is also still subjected to continuous shelling from Russia. The next is Kharkiv. Kharkiv is the second largest city in Ukraine that is subjected to constant bomb shelling because of its closeness to the Russian border. Another place that is constantly bombarded is Sumy. That is also a place in Ukraine that is very close to the Russian border. The next is Zaporizhia. Zaporizhia is captured by the Russian forces, but understand that this is Europe's largest nuclear power plant. The next place is Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk comes in Donetsk and it was recently in news because the Russian forces captured Pokrovsk. Bakhmut is also a place that is resulting in huge bloodshed due to the war between Russia and Ukraine. And the last place is Advika. Advika was formerly heavily fortified by the Ukrainian forces but currently captured by the Russian forces. Now, after looking at some of the important Ukrainian places in the Russia-Ukraine war, now let us look at some of the Russian places that were in the news because of the Russia-Ukraine war. The first city is Belgorod city. Now, this Belgorod city is a city in Russia that is also subjected to constant bomb shelling from the Ukrainian side, and this Belgorod is also along the border of Ukraine near the Kharkiv city of Ukraine. The next is the Kerch Strait. In the beginning, I told you that Kerch Strait is a narrow strip of water body that connects the Sea of Azov with the Black Sea, but there in Kerch Strait, there is something called Kerch Bridge that connects the mainland Russia with Crimea. Understand that Crimea was annexed by Russia in 2014 and this Kerch Bridge is the single sole connectivity of the mainland Russia with the Crimean Peninsula. So this Kerch Bridge was destroyed by the Ukrainian forces during the Russia-Ukraine war. The Ukrainian forces also undertook something called Operation Spiderweb, which involved bombing some of the interior cities of Russia, and these include one, Irkutsk, which is Russia's industrial complex. The second is Murmansk, which is Russia's Arctic port. The third is Ryazan, which hosts Russia's aviation asset. Ivanovo, which is associated with Russia's military and airborne infrastructure. And the last is Omur Oblast, which is located in the far eastern region near China. So these were the regions that were bombed under Operation Spiderweb by the Ukrainian forces. So after looking at the places in news of both the Russian and the Ukrainian part, now let us move into the country called Moldova. Now understand that Moldova is a small landlocked country in Eastern Europe, and to its east is Ukraine, and to the west is Romania. Now, to the eastern part of this Moldova, near the border of Ukraine, there is a separatist region that is called Transnistria, and the capital of this Transnistria is Trisopol. It is alleged that these separatist forces are backed by Russia, and there is a Russia-sanctioned forces that are stationed in Transnistria. The next important hotspot in Eastern Europe is the Caucasus countries. Now understand that the Caucasus countries come at the junction of Eastern Europe and West Asia, and these Caucasus countries are at the junction of Caspian Sea on one side and Black Sea on the other side. Now if you look at it carefully, Caucasus countries mainly are three, that is Azerbaijan, Armenia and Georgia. Georgia is towards the Black Sea side, Azerbaijan is to the Caspian Sea side, and Armenia is locked in between Georgia and Azerbaijan. Now the first place that has always been in news is Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh is internationally recognized to be a region that is part of Azerbaijan but is dominated by Armenian ethnic people. So it is constantly in conflict between Armenia and Azerbaijan. The second important corridor is Janjijur corridor. Now Janjijur corridor is a proposed corridor that is set to connect the mainland Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan, which is an enclave that is present in southern Armenia. Now this Nakhchivan is an enclave of Azerbaijan that is bordering the Turkey. So if this proposed corridor is successful, then not only will it connect the mainland Azerbaijan with Nakhchivan, but it will also connect Azerbaijan directly with Turkey. But why is this proposed Janjijur corridor in news is because if this corridor becomes successful, then the corridor traverses through Armenia, and Armenia may lose sovereignty of some land along which the corridor will traverse. The third important place is Lanchin corridor. Understand that Lanchin corridor is a roadway that links Armenia with Nagorno-Karabakh. Understand that Nagorno-Karabakh, though is in Azerbaijan, it is mainly dominated by Armenians in its ethnicity. So it is the only roadway. Lanchin corridor is the only roadway that connects the Armenian mainland with the Nagorno-Karabakh. So why is it in news is because Azerbaijan has imposed several blockades and restrictions that has hurt humanitarian movements as well as movements of people between Nagorno-Karabakh and Armenia. So overall you saw not only the static part but also the places in news, especially in Eastern Europe. So now let us move on to the next one. Alright guys, so we have finished West Asia, we have finished Eastern Europe. The next important part from the exam's perspective is Africa. So in Africa, let us first look at some of the static part and then move into the places in news. So when you take Africa, the first thing that will come to our mind is the Sahara Desert. Sahara Desert is the largest desert in the world, and some of the sub-regions within Sahara Desert are, one is Nubian Desert. Nubian Desert is present in the northeastern part of Sudan, and Libyan Desert is separated from Nubian Desert by River Nile. Aggar Mountains in Algeria and Tibetsi Mountains in Chad are two important mountains that are present within Sahara Desert. Also remember, the highest peak of Sahara is Emi Kausi, and this Emi Kausi is a peak that is present in Mount Tibetsi in the Sahara Desert. The next comes the Sahel region. Sahel region is a region that is adjacent to the Sahara Desert. It is a semi-arid strip that runs from Eritrea in the east to Senegal in the west. This Sahel region is a region of transition from the Sahara Desert towards the Savannah in the south. The next is the Kalahari Desert. Kalahari Desert spreads across Namibia, Botswana and South Africa, and a very famous swamp called Okavango swamps are located in the Kalahari Desert, which is an inland drainage system of the Okavango River and also is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And the next is the Namib Desert. Namib Desert spreads along Namibia, Angola and South Africa and is considered one of the oldest deserts in the world. The next is the Karoo Desert. The Karoo Desert is present within South Africa. It can be divided into Northern Karoo and the smaller Karoo. And the most distinct part is it is famous for fossils of pre-dinosaur era. The next is the Danakil Desert. Danakil Desert is also known as Afar Triangle because it comes at the tri-junction of Eritrea, Djibouti and Ethiopia. In this Danakil Desert, you have the Danakil Depression, which is one of the lowest points on earth because it is at minus 116 meters below sea level. And the last desert is the Ogaden Desert. Ogaden Desert is along the Horn of Africa and it is a region of contention between Ethiopia and Somalia. Now let us just look at some of the important rivers of Africa. The first is the Nile River. Now understand that Nile River is formed by the confluence of White Nile and Blue Nile at Khartoum, Sudan. Now, White Nile takes birth along Lake Victoria. Lake Victoria itself is shared by Kenya, Tanzania and Uganda. So the White Nile, it takes birth in Lake Victoria. The Blue Nile originates in Ethiopia along Lake Tana. So Blue Nile that originates along Lake Tana and White Nile that originates near Lake Victoria, both will confluence at Khartoum, Sudan in order to form the river Nile. Also know that Nile is the longest river of Africa and it empties out into the Mediterranean Sea. The next important river is Congo River. Congo River is the second longest river of Africa. Congo mainly takes birth along the borders of Democratic Republic of Congo and Zambia. It takes birth along Lualaba headwaters in the Zambian islands, and it empties out into Atlantic Ocean. The next important river is Niger River. Niger River is a major river of West Africa. It rises in Guinea Islands and it flows through Niger, Mali, Nigeria and Benin, and it empties out into the Atlantic Ocean. The next river is Zambezi River. Zambezi River is a major southern African river. It takes birth in Zambia and it flows across Zambia, Angola, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and it empties out into Indian Ocean via the Mozambique Channel. The next important river is Orange River. Now Orange River is also an important river within the southern part of the African continent, and this river takes birth in Drakensberg Mountains inside South Africa near Lesotho Enclave. Now this river flows through South Africa and Namibia and empties out into Atlantic Ocean. There is one more river called Limpopo River. Limpopo River also takes birth in South Africa and it flows through South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe and Mozambique, and it empties out into Indian Ocean. The next river is Volta River. Understand that Volta River is an important lifeline of Ghana, and this Volta River is formed by the confluence of White Volta and Black Volta. These are two streams that are originating from Burkina Faso, and then they confluence to form Volta, which then flows through Ghana. So this Volta River that flows along Ghana will empty out into the Atlantic Ocean via the Gulf of Guinea. Alright, after looking at all the important rivers of Africa, now let us look at the important mountains of Africa. The first one is Mount Kilimanjaro. Understand that Mount Kilimanjaro comes in the northeastern part of Tanzania, and it has the highest peak of Africa, and that is Uhuru Peak, and it is also famous for glaciers. The second is Rwenzori Mountains. Rwenzori Mountains are also created along the border of Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda, and they are also known as Mountains of the Moon, and they are also famous for glaciers. The next is Atlas Mountains. Atlas Mountains are located in the northwestern part of Africa, and they mainly cover Morocco, Algeria and Tunisia. The next is Drakensberg Plateau in South Africa. It comes at the junction of South Africa and Lesotho and is very famous for biodiversity. And the last mountain is Tibet Mountain. This comes at the junction of southern Chad and northern Libya, and it houses the highest peak of Sahara Desert, and that is Emi Kausi. Now we just looked at the static part of the African continent. Now let us move into the places in news. And one place that we have to focus upon is Democratic Republic of Congo. Understand that there is always constant conflict in the entire African continent, and few places that have renewed conflicts, where one Democratic Republic of Congo, where the M23 rebel group have again started clashes with the government forces, and few places that are in news, where one is Goma, another is Bukavu, another is North Kivu and Southern Kivu, and along with that a new place that is in news is Rushuru. And this Rushuru has also become a new battleground for the M23 rebels. Alright, the next area of focus within the African continent is the Darfur. When I say Darfur, Darfur is a region that is located in Western Sudan. It is mainly contested by two groups. On one side you have the Sudanese armed forces, and on the other side you have the Rapid Support Forces. The Sudanese armed forces also will back a militia. That militia is known as Janjaweed. So both the factions have caused humanitarian killings and massive civilian massacre. Now, apart from Darfur, you also have an island called Tuti Island that is in news, because both these factions have extended their conflict into the Tuti Island. Now, this Tuti Island is very strategic, because I have told you in the beginning that River Nile takes birth in Khartoum. River Nile takes birth when White Nile and Blue Nile will confluence at Khartoum. When the White Nile and Blue Nile confluence, they confluence at a place near Khartoum that is called Tuti Island. So this Tuti Island is a very strategic place that controls the water supply of the entire Sudan, and the conflict between the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudanese armed forces have extended to this Tuti Island. Apart from this, within the Darfur region, there are few places that are in news because of the conflict between these two factions, and those places are: one, you have El Fasher; the second, you have Wad Madani; the third, you have Naila; the fourth, you have Omdurman; and the fifth, you have Gizira. These are the places in news because of the conflicts between these two factions in the Darfur region. The next is the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. This is a massive hydroelectric project taken up by the Ethiopian government along Blue Nile. Now the conflict rises because Egypt, which is a downstream country for River Nile, is dependent on River Nile for its irrigation as well as drinking purposes, and any dam construction in the upstream part will reduce the water supply to Egypt. And this is exactly the tension that has risen due to the Great Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Another important terminology in these conflicts is something called Kassala Corridor. corridor. Kassala is a place in eastern Sudan. Basically, it's a corridor that connects the eastern Sudan with Eritrea. And why does this corridor become very important is because due to the ongoing conflicts in Sudan, many of the refugees are leaving Sudan and moving to Eritrea via this corridor. Now, let us focus on the Horn of Africa. In the Horn of Africa, you have four main countries. One is Eritrea, Djibouti, Ethiopia, and Somalia. Now, look at this. In Somalia, there is something called Somaliland. This Somaliland had declared independence from Somalia in 1991, but it is not internationally recognized. But why is it in news is because Ethiopia signs a very controversial maritime access agreement with the Somaliland in order to get the port, and that port is known as Berbera Port, which is a strategic port along the Gulf of Aden. The next is the Djibouti. Djibouti is a country that has become a host for military naval bases of many countries. It includes the naval bases of USA, China, Japan, and France. Why is it that all these nations are setting up naval bases in Djibouti is because of its location to Strait of Bab el Mandeb. The next important region is Puntland. Puntland is also present in Somalia, but unlike Somaliland, Puntland does not claim complete independence. It is just a semi-autonomous region present in Somalia. Why is it in news is because of the counter-terrorism operations that is going on against the Al-Shabaab faction of the ISIS group. The next important conflict is the Tigray conflict. The Tigray conflict is happening in the northern part of Ethiopia. It is a civilian unrest because of the conflict between Ethiopian Federal Forces and Tigray Liberation People's Front. Mekelle is the capital of the Tigray region. Now, after the Tigray conflict, there is another region that has come unrest, and that is Amara region. Now, Amara region is also undergoing civilian unrest because of the conflict between the Ethiopian Federal Forces against Fano groups. This is another faction called Fano groups. Another important conflict in Ethiopia is the Oromo conflict. What is Oromo? Oromia is the largest state in Ethiopia, and Oromo is the largest ethnic group of Ethiopia, and this largest ethnic group Oromo is fighting against the Ethiopian Federal Forces, and this is another conflict that you should know. The next is the Lake Chad Basin. When I say Lake Chad Basin, it mainly constitutes Chad, Niger, Nigeria, and Cameroon. Why is this in news is because of the Boko Haram insurgency. This particular basin is always in conflict due to humanitarian crisis, insurgency, and the Lake Chad is also undergoing shrinkage due to climate change. Also, within Nigeria, some places are affected by the Boko Haram insurgency, and those places are 1 Maiduguri, 2 Borno, 3 Zamfara, and 4 Kaduna. One other place in Mozambique that is also suffering from insurgency is Cabo Delgado. Another important news from the African continent is the ECOWAS. ECOWAS just celebrated 50 years of anniversary of its formation of the grouping. ECOWAS means Economic Community of West African States. Now, this was formed in 1975, and they are a 15-member grouping. Now see, amongst the 15-member grouping, recently 3 members came out of the grouping and formed their own member or their own regional cooperation, and these 3 countries were Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso. Now these 3 countries came out of the grouping and they formed Alliance of Sahel State, and because this alliance can pose a threat to the regional unity of West Africa, this was in news. So overall, I have tried to cover the static part of the African continent as well as the important places in news from the African continent. So we are done with this. Let us move on to the next one. Alright guys, now let us move on to the Pacific Islands. Again, these islands are very important. They are always in news because 1, they are resource rich. 2, they are a place of contention for USA, France, Australia, and China. And 3, they are also very vulnerable to the climate change and the consequence of sea level rise. And hence, these places are very important from your exams point of view. So when we say Pacific Islands, the first thing that you should know is the Coral Triangle. Now, Coral Triangle is an area of 6 million square kilometers in the Pacific Islands, and it is shared by almost 6 countries. Those countries are Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, Timor-Leste, Solomon Islands, and Papua New Guinea. And apart from this, the Pacific Islands can be categorized into 3 geographical zones on the basis of culture and ethnicity. And on that basis, we can divide the Pacific group of islands into 3 zones. The first is Melanesia. Melanesia means dark islands, which means it is dominated by black-skinned indigenous population. The next is Micronesia. Micronesia means small islands because it is dominated by many small islands north of the equator. And the last is Polynesia. As the name suggests, Polynesia means many islands, and it is the largest Pacific zone by ocean area. Now observe these 3 groups of islands, and within these groups of islands, there are many places that are in news. Now let us focus on Melanesia. So when I say Melanesia, these are important countries that are part of this grouping of Melanesia. The first is Papua New Guinea. The next is New Caledonia. The third is Vanuatu. The fourth is Fiji, and the fifth is Solomon Islands. Now understand that Solomon Islands was in news because they signed a controversial treaty with China that allowed China to set up their military base 1,700 kilometers away from the coast of Australia in the Solomon Islands. The second is Papua New Guinea. Again, here there is a race for competition to access more resources and defense agreements between USA and China with Papua New Guinea. Vanuatu is also a place in news because one, it is highly vulnerable to climate change and sea level rise. The second is Chinese has deployed its military in Vanuatu, and the third is Lalit Modi had applied for visa to Vanuatu, which was rejected by the Prime Minister of Vanuatu on the request of the Indian government. The next is New Caledonia. Now New Caledonia is controlled by France. The second is New Caledonia is important because 25% of the world's nickel reserves are in New Caledonia. The third is it is also undergoing several civilian unrest due to pro-independence protests and also some protests involving some electoral violations. And the last island that has been in the place of news in this Melanesia grouping is Fiji. Fiji is the most developed island in the Pacific, and it also hosts the Pacific Islands Forum headquarters. And if you remember, we also have the Forum for Indo-Pacific Cooperation, which is called FIPIC. This FIPIC is an agreement that is signed between the Indian government with 14 Pacific Island nations, and this was signed in 2014, and the first session of this FIPIC was held in Fiji. The second was held in Jaipur. The third was held in 2023 in Papua New Guinea. Now let us look into the next grouping of the Pacific Islands, and that is Micronesia. Some important islands within Micronesia are Guam, then you have the Marshall Islands, then you have the Kiribati, Nauru, and Palau. So the first one that is in news is Guam Islands. Guam Islands is under the control of United States, and it is a military base of United States of America in the Pacific group of islands. The second is the Marshall Islands. Believe it or not, Marshall Islands is the most nuclear contaminated islands, and this is because of the 67 nuclear tests that USA had held in this Marshall Islands. The third important island is Palau. Palau is a nation that recognizes Taiwan, and it also has a very important diplomatic compact agreement with USA for its defense against China. The next is Kiribati. Kiribati is in news because it is extremely vulnerable to climate change because 95% of its infrastructure is just 10 meters above the sea level. The last important island within Micronesia that is in news is Nauru. Nauru is the smallest island nation in the world, and it is the third smallest country in the world. Now why is it in news is because in 2024 this island nation revoked its recognition of Taiwan and agreed for a diplomatic recognition of China. And next grouping within the Pacific Islands is the Polynesia. Now Polynesia has several important islands such as Samoa, Tuvalu, Tonga, and French Polynesia. Samoa is in news because for the first time in 2024, any Pacific nation that has hosted the Commonwealth head of governments was Samoa, and this is the first time that has happened within any Pacific island nations. Tuvalu is in news because it is the first nation to disappear due to sea level rise caused by climate change, because Tuvalu is a nation that has 11,000 population across 9 atolls with just 2 meters above the sea level. Tonga is in news because it is the only Pacific monarchy that experienced a tsunami due to underwater volcanic eruptions. The last is French Polynesia. Again, French Polynesia is an island that suffers from nuclear contamination because of more than 190 nuclear tests that was conducted by France from the year 1960s to 1990s. So these were some places that were in news, especially from the Pacific Islands. Again, they are very strategic and very important, so I hope you have marked down everything. So now with the end of Pacific Islands, now let us move into the North American continent. Now in North America, let us see some of the major mountain ranges. The first is the Rockies mountain, which extends from Canada to USA. The second is the Appalachian mountains that is present in the eastern part of USA and southeastern part of Canada. And the third is Sierra Nevada, which is present in the western part of USA, sharing the border of the states California and Nevada. The fourth is the Alaska range. Denali is the highest peak of North America that is present in this Alaska range. And the next is Sierra Madre Mountains. Sierra Madre Mountains is present in Mexico. The next is Mackenzie Mountains. Mackenzie Mountains are present in northwestern part of Canada. And the last is Laurentian Mountains, which is present in eastern part of Canada. The next is, let us look at the lakes of North American continent. The first is the Great Lakes of America. In that, the first one is Lake Superior. This is the largest freshwater lake by surface area in the world. The next is Lake Michigan. This is the only lake that is entirely within the boundary of USA. The third is Lake Huron. The fourth is Lake Erie, and the fifth is Lake Ontario. Together, these make the Great Lakes of United States of America. Along with this, in Canada, you have some of the important lakes such as Lake Bear, Lake Slave, Lake Athabasca, and Lake Winnipeg. Look at them from north to south. It is very, very important that you know this information. Now we have seen the static part. Now let us look at few places that are in news from North America. The first is Mexico. Because Mexico is suffering from cartel-based violence, some places are in news like Tijuana, Tabasco, and Sinaloa. These are the three places that are suffering from cartel-based violence. The next important place is Haiti. Haiti is also facing a lot of humanitarian and security crisis because of many armed gangs, especially in its capital, Port-au-Prince. And also know that Haiti is the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere of the world. Apart from this, in America, Gulf of Mexico has been renamed as Gulf of America. And within that, you have something called Yucatan Peninsula. Yucatan Peninsula is also important. It is shared by 1 Mexico, 2 is Belize, and 3 is Guatemala. Now, this Gulf of Mexico as well as Yucatan Peninsula will experience tornadoes as well as hurricanes. Now, when I say Belize and Guatemala, this Belize and Guatemala come under a broad ambit of Central American nations. Now, in your atlas, look at the Central American nations very carefully in the same order that I'll tell you. The Central American nations are, 1 is Belize, the second is Guatemala, the third is Honduras, the next is El Salvador, the next is Nicaragua, the next is Costa Rica, and the last is Panama. Remember Panama Canal? So these are also always in news. So you should know the Central American countries. So I'll just repeat it again. You have, 1 is Belize, Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, Nicaragua, Costa Rica, and the last is Panama. If you see carefully, this Panama will go and join Colombia in South America. So this is what is known as the Isthmus of Panama. So these are the Central American nations. Now, after this, look at the southeastern part of the North American continent. You have a group of many small islands which are mainly coral islands, which are called Caribbean islands. They also call it as Mesoamerican Reef. Now, these Caribbean islands can be divided into Greater Antilles and Lesser Antilles. Now, Greater Antilles includes big island nations such as Puerto Rico, Cuba, Haiti, Dominican Republic, and Jamaica. Remember, Cuba is something that Donald Trump keeps talking about, so make sure that you know these nations very well. Next, Lesser Antilles, some of the important island nations are Trinidad and Tobago, St. Lucia, Barbados. Why Trinidad and Tobago is very important is, in 2025, our Prime Minister of India went to Trinidad and Tobago as a diplomatic meet, and this is something that happened after 25 years, and hence these places and these islands are in news. Alright guys, so we are done with the North American continent. Let us move to the South American continent. So you can open the next page and look at the South American continent. Now here you have the Andes mountain. Observe the countries that the Andes mountain traverses. You have Cordillera Occidental and Cordillera Oriental. Now in Andes, the highest peak is Aconcagua. It is the highest peak of South America. The second is you have also a peak in Andes mountain. Now this is the furthest point from the Earth's center. Why they call it the furthest point from the Earth's center is because of the bulge created by the Earth at the equator. The third is Lake Titicaca. Lake Titicaca is the highest navigable lake in the world. The next, observe Angel Falls. Angel Falls is the world's highest uninterrupted waterfalls. The next is Cotopaxi. Observe that Cotopaxi is also part of the Andes mountain, and it is the active stratovolcano present in the Andes. Along with this, also observe Ojos del Salado. Ojos del Salado is the world's highest active volcano. And finally, observe Guyana Highlands. Higlands. Guyana Highlands. This Guyana Highlands is shared by Guyana, Suriname, and Venezuela, and is very famous for tabletop mountains. Apart from that, mineral-rich regions of South America that has been in news. One is the Lithium Triangle, which is shared by Bolivia, Argentina, and Chile. And then the regions in Brazil that are very famous in minerals are, one is Carajás province, and the another is Minas Gerais. And the next is Guyana Islands that we just discussed a few minutes before. That also is very famous for diamonds and gold. And next comes Potosi region. Potosi region in Bolivia is also very, very famous for minerals, especially silver mining. And then comes the last place that is very famous, and it is known as Cuchicuamata. Cuchicuamata in Chile is in the Andes mountain and has the largest reserves of copper in the world. After this, let us look at some of the important rivers of South America. The first one is Amazon River. The source of Amazon River is in Peru. It flows through Peru, Colombia, and Brazil, and its mouth is in Atlantic Ocean. The next important river is the Parana River. Understand that Parana River takes birth in Rio de Plata. Rio de Plata is a region that comes between Argentina and Uruguay, and it is Rio de Plata where both rivers take origin. One is the Parana River and the other is Uruguay River. Both are very, very important, and Parana River empties out into the Atlantic Ocean. And the third is São Francisco River. São Francisco River is a river that is completely within the boundaries of Brazil. And the last is Magdalena River. Magdalena River is an important lifeline of Colombia. Apart from this, important grasslands that you should know within South America, both tropical grasslands and temperate grasslands are, one is Llanos, another is Campos, then you have Pampas, then you have Cerrado, then you have Mato Grosso, and the last is Gran Chaco. So we have gone through the static part of the South American continent. Few places that are in news from South America are, one, Ecuador. Ecuador is suffering from gang violence and prison unrest, and this has resulted in massive curfews across the country. The next is Peru. Peru is suffering from repeated presidential crises and repeated impeachment battles. This has resulted in political uncertainty in Peru. The next is Pathanal. Pathanal is the world's largest tropical wetland, and this is suffering from severe wildfires. The next place that is in news is Cerrado. Cerrado is a very rich savanna ecosystem which has been completely deforested in order to transform it into soybean farming. And the last place that is in news is Essequibo. Essequibo is in a territorial dispute between Guyana and Venezuela because Essequibo is very rich in oil and natural gas. Alright guys, we have successfully finished South America. We have seen both the static part as well as the places in news in South America. Now let us move into another important theater, and that is Southeast Asia. Some important straits that you should know from Southeast Asia are: one is Malacca Strait, another is Sunda Strait, third is Lombok Strait, the fourth is Makassar Strait, then you have Taiwan Strait and Tsushima Strait. And apart from this, you also have Luzon Strait. Now let me repeat it: Malacca Strait, Sunda Strait, Lombok Strait, Makassar Strait, Tsushima Strait, Taiwan Strait and Luzon Strait. Now apart from this, there are two other straits that is called Torres Strait as well as Bass Strait. Now this Torres Strait and Bass Strait are present in Australia, and Australia is part of Oceania and not Southeast Asia. That's why I'm not covering it here. So I hope you understood what are the important straits of Southeast Asia. Now within Southeast Asia, the first country that we'll focus upon is Myanmar. In Myanmar, there is the civilian unrest that is going on from 2021 due to the military coup. There is a fight between the Myanmar army as well as several rebel groups such as Arakan army, and this civilian unrest has spread to the Rakhine state, the Shan state, the Kanchin state and Sagyang region. These are regions that are facing extreme civilian unrest due to the fight between the Myanmar army and the other rebel forces. Also in 2025, Myanmar experienced a 7.9 magnitude earthquake that resulted in severe destructions in the Sagyang region as well as Bago region. Along with that, a place called Bagan, which is a UNESCO World Heritage Site for thousands of temples, was also destroyed due to this earthquake. The next region that I want you to focus upon is Thailand and Cambodia. Now here also there are many places contested by these two countries, and one such is Chong Bok. Now Chong Bok is a region that comes at a tri-junction of Laos, Cambodia and Thailand. It is claimed by both Cambodia and Thailand. That is the reason why this place is in news. And the second place that is in contention between these two countries are Phra Vihir Temple. This Phra Vihir Temple is basically an ancient temple that belongs to or is dedicated to Shiva, and this was decided that it belongs to Cambodia by the International Court of Justice in 1962. But there is still tension between the two countries on claiming this particular ancient group of temples. The next region that I want you to focus is the Pattani region in the southern Thailand. This is also in news because it experiences separatist insurgencies as well as ethnic tensions. The next important place is Chumpon Renong Land Bridge. Now understand that this Chumpon Renong Land Bridge is seen as an alternative to Kra Canal. Chumpon Renong Land Bridge connects the Gulf of Thailand with the Andaman Sea. Now what is the difference between Kra Canal and Chumpon Renong Land Bridge is, Kra Canal is nothing but cutting the land of Thailand to connect both the Gulf of Thailand and Andaman Sea, but Chumpon Renong Land Bridge is not cutting the land but just connecting Gulf of Thailand with the Andaman Sea with the help of rail and road projects. And the last is the Kaladan multimodal project that is set to become fully operational by 2027, and this Kaladan multimodal project is where the Kolkata port of India is connected to Sitaway port of Myanmar, and from Sitaway port we take the Kaladan river to go to Paletwa in Myanmar, and from Paletwa we connect to Zorinpoi in Mizoram of India, and that is how from eastern part of India we connect to the northeastern part of India with the help of the Kaladan multimodal project, which is going to be operational by 2027. Now I want you to shift your focus to East Asia. In East Asia you have South Korea. In 2024 the president imposed the martial law for a brief period in South Korea, and an important protest site during this period was Gangwon. And in North Korea there is another place that is seen in news, especially for the missile testing as well as naval facilities, and that is Wonsan. Apart from this, South China Sea has always been a theater of conflict between China, Philippines, Cambodia, Vietnam. So please make sure that you understand the South China Sea. What are the different countries that are surrounding the South China Sea? I'm not going to repeat it here. That is something that you should know by default. So some places within the South China Sea that are in news is, first is Texian Reef. It is also known as Sandy Bay. This is the site of confrontation between China and Philippines near the Spratly Islands. The next is Senkaku Islands. This is disputed between China and Japan. The third is Ream Naval Base Sihanoukville in Cambodia. This is where China is slowly trying to expand its influence into the Gulf of Thailand, and this is coming in confrontation with Cambodia again. And the next is the Natuna Islands. This is where the 9-dash line of China overlaps with the sovereignty of Indonesia, and Indonesia is claiming fishing rights, and this is leading to the confrontation between Indonesia and China. And since we are speaking about Indonesia, I'll give you one more information, that is Nusantara is a new capital that is being built in order to replace Jakarta. And one more information is, because of rare earth mining, Mekong is undergoing extreme pollution, and one such city along the banks of Mekong River that is suffering from this pollution is Chiang Saen in Thailand. Now, one assignment what I want to give is, please trace the Mekong River, which all countries that this Mekong River will traverse through. That is a very, very important information you should know from the exam point of view. So please make sure that you map out all the countries that the Mekong River traverses through. And so we have finally completed the important places in the Southeast Asia. Now let us move into the theater of South Asia. In South Asia, the first place that you should know is Torkham Crossing. This Torkham Crossing is a place that is in conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan. The second important place that you should know is Paktika province. This is entirely along the border of Pakistan. However, it has faced earthquakes and humanitarian crisis, and hence it is in news. The third place is Orakzai district. Orakzai district comes in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa region of Pakistan. It is also a place of conflict between Pakistan and Afghanistan. This is where the famous Khyber Pass is also located. Now here, this was previously ruled by the federally administered tribal areas. In 2018, Pakistan passed an amendment to merge this federally administered tribal areas into the Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. Apart from this, when we come to Indian Ocean, the islands of Indian Ocean is very, very important. You should know the islands of Indian Ocean from north to south. So you have basically you have the Lakshadweep and Andaman Nicobar Islands. These are islands of India that are there in the Indian Ocean. Apart from this and apart from Sri Lanka, you have Maldives, Socotra, Seychelles, Comoros, Chagos, Mauritius, Reunion and Madagascar. These are the islands from north to south. I've told it from north to south, so make sure that you mark it and memorize it properly. Now, if you take Chagos Archipelago, it was in news because formerly it was administered by United Kingdom, but now in 2024, they have ceded the territory to Mauritius. Now, within this Chagos Archipelago, there is something called Diego Garcia. Now, this Diego Garcia is under the lease of United Kingdom, which is going to be under the lease of United Kingdom for 99 more years. And United Kingdom is going to pay lease to Mauritius for this Diego Garcia Island. And this Diego Garcia Island is a military base of United States of America in the Indian Ocean. Apart from this, Bangladesh recently underwent civilian unrest, and few places that were in news because of that civilian unrest were one, Cox's Bazar, the second is Rajshahi, the third is Dan Modi, and the fourth place is Shahbag. So these places were in news due to the civilian unrest that happened in Bangladesh. Alright guys, so we have successfully finished all the important places in news that are very important for your upcoming UPSC Prelims exam. We have not only covered the places in news, we have understood why they are in places in news, and also if we take that region, we have also tried to cover the spatial aspect of that region, because that is how UPSC will always ask question. Now this has taken tremendous efforts for us to bring it to you. So one small request is, please make sure that you share this video with as many people as possible, because that is important for us. That will keep us motivated to do this on a regular basis. I hope you'll enjoy it. My best wishes to all my students across India for those who are writing the upcoming UPSC Prelims exam. Thank you so much for all the love and support. Bye.